Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you here, and thanks for organizers for letting us here to show you the future. So that's why we decided to continue in English, not in Chinese yet. And, well, first of all, let me ask you, does anybody know what foresight means? Anybody? Come on, there's one person from our Science and Technology Foresight Master Program here. You should know what foresight means. Raise your hand. Come on, raise your hand. Okay. So, generally, foresight is a methodology for constructing the future. Not forecasting, but providing information for key stakeholders what will be the shape of the future. Do you know, is it possible to make a 100% probability forecast? Anyone? Do you think it's possible? Possible? Impossible. Well, generally, it's quite hard to make a forecast very, very precise for long-term period. But if you make a foresight, you're not trying to forecast, you're trying to foresee, to construct the future, to be adaptive, to be agile to this future. That's why let everybody imagine that you are eagles. So now we are raising from our forests, fields, fishery industries, and we look at agriculture like eagle-eye view. So we're all birds, and we're looking from very, very macro perspective, and then go deeper and deeper, all right? That's why I've decided to start from technology foresight system in Russia. And I think it will be very interesting and very useful for all our colleagues here. Then we go in depth into agricultural foresight 2030, and my colleague Илья Kuzьминov will tell you in details what it means. And then we go back for understanding how agricultural foresight could be useful for all your activities. Please raise your hands, those who think that you could make business in agro sector. All right, others? You are just interesting? Okay, so I guess science, all right? Science side, do you have some representative from science? Please raise your hands. Okay, business, science, the rest are experts. Oh, you just decided to sit here, it's not so warm like outside, it's comfortable, free water. All right, anyway, if you want to be efficient, if you want to be successful in business and agro, in science and agro, in education or in foresight, you should understand, first of all, what are the global trends and local perspectives that shape the whole future. So everybody now are talking about global trends. Could you please provide me a definition? What is a global trend? Anyone, any ideas? Global trend is what? Foresight. Foresight is a very, very big methodology. Direction, popular, okay. It should be systemic and sustainable, right? So global trend is when some direction, raising, penetrates, declines, and has some effects. So three composites of global trend definition. Some activity, object, and effect. Is it clear? All right, so let's go further. Foresight is a methodology that has been very, very long story. Now around 2,000 different countries adapted foresight methodology, and we start from US, Japan, Cuba, which is very interesting, Cuba, and not United Nations, but Soviet Union. So the first attempts to try to foresee the future were done by these countries. And then other countries like Sweden, France, Brazil, now all countries, almost all countries in the whole world use foresight methodology. Even BRICS. So you're here because of BRICS and because of Agro, because of Skolkovo, HSC, and good weather. So all BRIC countries now use foresight methodology, trying to foresee their future, to forecast their future, and to formulate their future. So if we go in depth, and this is a picture of key Russian foresight projects on different levels. Once again, foresight is a methodology to formulate the future using different statistical, econometrical, marketing methods, modeling methods, and engaging key stakeholders. Are you stakeholders in agro? I hope sure you should be stakeholders in agro. Stakeholders are persons or representatives of different organizations who could influence the future. If you are not influencing the future in agro, so please get on board and start be stakeholders. So what is here? Here is a representative number of foresight projects done in Russia, starting from federal level, including national foresight, and going to regional level, sectoral and infrastructural level. So you could use all these projects like a basis for your future agro-business, science and educational endeavors. I hope it's quite clear for you now that you cannot treat agriculture like a separate sector. Agriculture is a horizontal sector that takes on board different technologies like ICT, advanced manufacturing technologies like 3D printing or 3D bioprinting, energy technologies like biofuels or new types of green energy, new transport technologies like Hyperloop, for example. Does anybody know what Hyperloop is? Anybody, please Google it. It's very interesting. Hyperloop. For 1 hour, 1,000 kilometers. It creates new transport society, new transport for new agriculture. Space technologies like monitoring technologies. Agriculture stands in the center of all these new technologies, and you cannot be successful in agricultural sector without understanding all these global trends and new shapes. And we, with my colleague Ilya, will try to give you a menu because we are quite restricted in time, and we try to give you a menu for future technologies, for future vectors, for you to understand your own role in all this perfect future. And for sure, you could use all what was done in Russian S&T Foresight. And here's the project that we'll be talking about, Agro Foresight 2030. Do you see? Is it clear? You see, it's between national foresights and regional and sectoral foresights. So it's inside, in the core, in the center. For sure, you should use your expert knowledge. Does anybody know what big data is? Please raise your hands. Big data. Come on, everybody should raise your hands. Everybody should know what big data is. Do you know what mining or text mining is? Please raise your hands. Okay. So between analyzing and big data, using of big data, text mining, and artificial intelligence, lots of gaps. But what we are trying to do, and we'll tell you in brief, we are trying to use this artificial intelligence to extract all the information about the future from open resources. But without experts, without you, we cannot build this future. So we still need you. Well, unless 2030. Maybe in 2040, in 2050, we'll see. But for 10 or 15 years, we still need you. And you need us. And we need these foresight centers. What we've done, High School of Economics with Ministry of Education, we build a roadmap for centers for foresight, depending on different topics, for nanotechnologies, for biotechnologies, for agrotechnologies, for energy, for ICT. So lots of foresight centers, and it's only a map of Russia. We also are building an international foresight network with our colleagues from Brazil. Is anybody from Brazil here? Nobody? In BRICS, Brazil? Nobody, okay. So in Brazil, there is a foresight center, CGE, and now we are constructing with our colleagues and our colleagues from Manchester University, from UK, we're constructing an international foresight network center. And one of our topics will be identifying global trends and challenges, including agro, including green energy, including transport problems. So, as you may understand, everything should be put into a system. And I'd like to represent you Russian national foresight system. This system is being created because of 172, it's a number of our federal law for strategic planning. And we have 172, and we have 3 layers of the system. The first layer is national layer. Can you see it? Address of the President to Federal Assembly, strategic foresight, socio-economic foresight, budget forecast, not foresight, forecast, and strategy. Then Russian S&T foresight, this is national level, sectoral level, including different layers of sectoral foresights, and regional level. So once again, 3 layers, national, sectoral, and regional. Each regional ministry in Russia is responsible for sectoral foresight, regional ministry for regional foresight. And all this should be embedded in the system. And here, in sectoral foresights, we have an agro foresight, done in coherence with all this systemic overview. What could be a goal for foresight for agriculture? Any ideas before I show this? Okay. Any ideas? What should be the goal for national foresight for agriculture for 20 years, please?
We will not waste money for parts which we don't need. So we could invest in perspective technology.
Efficient investment, all right? Efficient investment and some perspective technologies. All right, other ideas, please? Okay, later, please. Improve new technologies, perfect. Improve existing technologies and create new technologies. Deal? Great. Other ideas? To combine science and business. Okay, so we want to bridge scientific development and business development. As you know, in Russia, it's a very, very large gap between science and business. Everybody from science says, all right, we have perfect science, why don't want you to pay for it? Everybody in business has, okay, I'm ready to pay, but please give me something valuable. And this is a problem, and foresight could be a bridge because it's a methodology for systemic correlation and establishing of relationships between business, science, government, and education. Okay, so now correct answer. Really, we want to create a very highly competitive agricultural sector in Russia. We want to think about different technologies and what should be the STI priorities. But the last but not the least, please, and that's why you are here, we want to create a system of agro-education and improve your skills. This is a very important point. And I'm not provocating now you here, but believe me, and it will be easier for you to believe, that in next 10 years, at least half of your skills will be useful. And other half of your skills will be useless. So at least half of your skills that you have now will be useless because of new technologies, because of rapid growth of new demand, new niches, and etc., etc. So I strongly recommend you to get on board conception of lifelong living. Please, education should be for the whole of your life. And the goals of foresight are creating the system very sustainable and very efficient. We have different ideas for this foresight, and this is a structure. So, first of all, global and national challenges for agricultural sector. Then we go for different scenarios Future is unpredictable, so let's write a scenario how it could be, and then we go for some recommendations for policy measures. This is a list of key challenges that everybody faces now, including BRICS, including Russia, including America, all countries. And I strongly recommend you to get on board this methodology. So 6 types of global challenges: social and political challenges, technological challenges, challenges including nature, technological challenges, challenges including values are very, very important. And what can we see here? Different challenges for agricultural sector. What is the most important challenge for agriculture? Please, your ideas. Before I show you the correct answer. Any ideas? The most important global challenge for agricultural sector? To produce food for everybody, cheap and green. Okay, other ideas? Sorry, you? Capital investment. If you have second microphone, I think it could be useful for participants. Please. Lack of resources, nanotechnologies. Other ideas from that corner, please. Demographic problem, you mean? Demographic problem. Okay, other ideas, please. Climate change. Exactly. Global warming, or maybe it could be cold and colder. What do you think? You know, there are 2 scientific schools struggling with each other. One says it could be very cold, and another says it would be very warm. We'll see, but that will affect agribusiness dramatically. So actually, you all are right, but I'd like you to understand that you cannot treat agricultural sector and trends and challenges in agriculture separately. It should be complex, multidisciplinary complex of different trends. And I'd like you to see the correct answer. Okay, so we'll start from economic challenges. One of the most important economic challenges for agriculture is changing global value chains. It's really very important. Does anybody know what Uber is? Uberization of economy. Do you know what it means? That means that different chains and different blocks in these chains are changing and declining because of new platform ICT technologies. So no taxi drivers, no farmers, no retail. Global value chains are changing dramatically, and this is the most important economic challenge for agriculture. If we go for society and social problems, for sure, one of the most important problems is the problem of security. Are you sure about security when you're eating the strawberry or green apple? Are you sure when you buy the salmon about security? And are you ready for new agriculture or not? Perception of innovations is very, very important challenge for everybody. If we look at environmental challenges, climate change is really important, but what about biodiversity? Biodiversity and declining this biodiversity is a real challenge for everybody, and we should know how to manage it. And values. Everybody is talking about values. You all are here because it's valuable for you. But how changes in our values could affect all your startups and businesses? Because what we see changing in people's habits, different habits. Everybody wants to be healthy, everybody wants to be on board, keep in touch, but what about food? is your food helpful for this or not? Are you ready that your breakfast, I hope everybody has breakfast for today. Okay, are you sure that your breakfast was useful? Are you sure that your breakfast was functional and could make you clever and cleaner and greener and better? Well, I'm not sure about mine. Anyway, we should understand what are the different convergence of political and value changes. And my most important technological challenges. What we can see here is next technological wave. And this technological wave will change agricultural sector dramatically. Everybody knows about Industry 4.0. Okay, does anybody heard about 3D printing? Please raise your hands. 3D printing. 3D printing, please raise. Are you kidding? I hope everybody knows what 3D printing is. If not, please Google it in a break. Today, it's very important. But we, I mean people who do foresight, we knew about 3D printing about, well, 20 years ago. And I know what will be after 3D printing. It will be nano-assembling, molecular nano-assembling, because 3D printing is additive technologies without going inside the molecular. So if you want to be on board, you are quite young, if you want to be on board, read foresights, understand foresights, because you could be an investor in 3D printing 20 years ago. If you lost your train, why not to be now investor in molecular nano-assembling instead of going for 3D printing? Think of this. This is very important. So once again, different challenges, different understanding of what agricultural sector would be, but we need answers. Everybody wants answers. Please raise your hand who want answers about our replies for global trends. Okay, others are thinking about 3D printing. Okay, so now I'd like to give the floor to my colleague Ilya, and Ilya will provide you a few answers about what will be the shape of agricultural sector, and then we'll get back with our eagle-eye view. So now please go in details of what agriculture is. Ilya, the floor is yours.
Hello. My name is Илья Кузьминов. I will tell you about the projections of global trends and challenges on the situation in Russian agricultural complex. Can I get this? As my colleague already told you, there are a big picture of grand challenges and trends which affect every aspect of agriculture production. The mosaic of these trends can either give us opportunities to develop our new food industries and new industries related to, for example, alternative use of agricultural raw materials, or they can create barriers for sustaining our global competitiveness. So taking into account the current situation and perspectives of science and technology development of Russian agriculture, we should find strategies, best ways to adapt to what goes on in the world. So on this picture, we can see the snapshot of our structural situation in our agriculture today. These figures can give some insights into the opportunities and threats we are facing now. As you can see, Russia has developed a much more modern and efficient agriculture complex than it was in the Soviet Union, with less losses of food, with less waste of raw materials and so on. So when you see that our agricultural arable land is declining, it's not that our agriculture is declining also. It's just another. It's optimization. It's structural and spatial territorial optimization of our production. So we are more efficient now. We can produce much more food per hectare than we could before. and it's very important. So in this sense, we are in the global trend of intensification, and in the global trend of transforming agricultural lands into other type of land uses. For example, when we can produce food on very small area perfectly, it would be ideally if we produce it in a city, as a city farmers, in vertical farms. Then we can convert a lot of arable land to pristine land, to, for example, natural reserves, biodiversity corridors and reserves, and so on. What we see next? We see that our agriculture is not diversified. We are specializing in producing grains and exporting grains. Yes, we are the first exporter of wheat, and we are the first exporter of some other cultures which are minor. Wheat is major culture, but there are some other cultures such as oats, which are in fact minor cultures on the global scale, while we are the main producer of such cultures. But what we see that we use a lot of our grain for feed of animals. It's not bad. It's good. But when we use food grain for feed, it's not so good, because there should be specialization. Special varieties should be grown to use as food, to produce bread and other things, and special varieties should be used to feed cattle and pigs and so on. So here we have a distorted structure of agricultural production. We export low cost and low quality grain, and we use part of grain which is supposed to be used as food, we use it as feed. What we see next? We see that as in many countries, we are going for more industrial and more intensive food production, such as producing poultry meat instead of beef, and some other products, meat products, which have high impacts on environment and which are just more expensive. But we should think about it. There are other ways, in fact. I will give some examples, some cases of American startups which are now developing, so you understand. If we go for poultry, it's yesterday. It's yesterday to intensify meat production by producing cheap protein using chicken. There are just new developments in these fields. For example, maybe you know such startup as Hampton Creek in United States is specialized in producing egg substitutes. They use plant sources, plant raw materials to produce, for example, eggless mayonnaise or other things. So they don't need the chicken to produce eggs. They just get the egg substitute, which are exactly the same in taste and nutritional value as eggs. Another, for example, another startup, which is called Memphis Meat from San Francisco. They got investment to develop synthetic production of pork and beef. So what this means? Have you ever heard about so-called in vitro meat or lab meat? Or maybe Frankenburger, synthetic meat, which journalists devised. So this term shows that many people now are not willing to get the idea of synthetically grown meat, like Frankenstein's monster, something unnatural. But yet, while some people don't think they would eat such meat, many venture investors already put their money into such startups which try to produce this synthetic meat. They use technologies of tissue culture, meaning you just cultivate cell culture, for example, of muscle cells of cow or pig in a synthetic environment, in a special liquid. And, and then you get a kind of steak without raising cow and killing it. Another example, several startups such as Clara Food and some others, they develop yeast cultures. Yeast is used, to produce ethanol and for other things. Yeast cultures it's a very ancient, that's to say, biotechnology. And some science shows that you can introduce, for example, chicken or cow genes into the yeast cells so that they can then produce, for example, egg whites. And Clara Food startup already got $2 million to develop technology of producing egg whites substitutes from yeast cultures. And another startup is Mufri, it's titled Mufri. It's also got a lot of financing for developing technology of transferring cow genes into yeast cultures so that yeast bioreactors produce milk. So you produce milk or meat or something just without animals. Now it's very expensive. There was an event in 2013 when scientists from Maastricht University in Netherlands presented a synthetic meat burger. And it was prepared and it was eaten to show journalists that it's possible. And then they disclosed the price. It was more than $300,000 to develop just such steak of meat. But scientists and investors think that it will cost maybe thousands of times cheaper in just 10 years. So in just 10 years, we can see synthetic. But we use technologies of yesterday. So when we finish our transition to more intensive agriculture here, the developed countries will already abolish livestock farming at all. And it will be a good trend because many scientists say that livestock farming is one of the major contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. It's 18%. It's more than the whole transportation sector. And so livestock breeding, it's devastational. It very gravely affects the environment. And if we succeed in producing meat, egg, and milk replacers using either plant raw materials or by growing these cultures in vitro, it will transform our economy and make it greener and make meat cheaper and also will make it safer. Let's go next. Fisheries. You see that after successful reforms of fisheries sector of 2007 in Russia, there is a good visible trend of growing and then stabilizing fisheries on high levels. But if we see the structure of this, we see that most of our fish is just exported in kind as raw material without processing, while Russia imports a lot of fish products. And here, while we have some good trends here, and our situation is at least not deteriorating, but we also in yesterday, because in developed countries and in China also, and in many countries of Southeast Asia, now aquaculture, meaning producing fish and fish products in the farming types, is producing 50%, half of all the fish production. And in Russia, aquaculture only produces about 3% of fish production. So the next development could be the following. When developed countries and the largest economies of Southeast Asia develop good genetic modification technologies for fish. For example, you maybe heard about AquAdvantage salmon. It's genetically modified salmon, which is developed by American company AquAdvantage, which now got approved by Food and Drug Administration of United States for production and for retail sales. This genetically modified salmon grows twice as faster as traditional aquaculture salmon, and 13 times faster than salmon which lives in wild. This will lead to the following. When developed countries put these technologies into large-scale enterprises, they will produce fish and fish products much cheaper than we can produce them by catching. And so the whole our industry of fisheries, with all these vessels, with all this cost to process these fish, with all the value chains of our fishery complex, can become just uncompetitive. And this 50% of our production will be not required, because 50% of our production of fish raw material is exports. And next, food industry. It's most interesting. We can see that ruble devaluation and embargo in answer to Western sanctions have led to great impacts. Share of imports in our retail declined from 35% or more to about 25%. So 10 percentage points per 2 years. And that we faced more than 20% growth in our food industry production. So some of import substitution has taken place. It's definitely so. But there are a lot of problems with this food industry because we are dependent on foreign equipment. And while devalued ruble is good for exporting, for exports competitiveness, it's bad when you don't have your own food production machinery industry. So while we can sell our production for more rubles, because ruble costs less in dollars, we still have to spend more rubles to buy this machinery. There is only several sub-industries in food industry where we now can produce competitive machinery. It's some in milking sector, some in production of meat products, and in bread, in some other sub-industries. But we are very dependent of machinery imports here. And while we struggle to import substitution of food products, in United States, in other countries, there are, again, just another trend. While we are struggling to win the battle of yesterday, they are developing new innovation. Who of us heard of Soylent? Soylent? Nobody. Soylent is an American startup which got funding, which got large funding on Tilt crowdfunding platform, which produces a type of food which you can dissolve in a glass of water, drink it, and it's good for all day. And you can just eat this or drink this food every day because it's completely full with nutrients and its structure is optimal. So it was developed. Taking into account the Food and Drug Administration of United States guidelines on nutritional standards, how much protein you need, how much fats you need, how much tissue, lignocellulosic components and other things you need in the food, vitamins, mineral components. And many people who don't have enough time, for example, or who just maybe hate traditional food, they transfer to this kind of foodstuffs like Soylent. When you just dissolve a packet of powder, and it's not harmful for health. It's nutritionally it has high nutritional value, and it's not harmful. It's useful for your health. And the story of this Soylent startup is the following. One software engineer had not enough time to eat, and he didn't like it. And so he tried to develop this composition, which will help him just to drink this glass of kind of yogurt made from powder and be happy. And from where he got the name of the startup, Soylent. It was, in fact, it's from the mid-century, because in 1970s, science fiction writer Harry Harrison wrote a novel, Make Space, Make Space. And then there was a film adaptation of this novel, which was named Soylent Green. In this dystopian film, there was it was a picture of society in 2022, where oceans are depleted, agricultural lands are depleted, cities are overpopulated, and there is deficit of food. And so most of the population problems with nutrition and have to use some food substitutes, some cheap food rations. And during this, during the plot of the film showed that the main character discovered that the new blockbuster product, Soylent Green, was produced from human corpses. So humans were recycled so that other humans eat humans. And so Soylent startup took this idea and ironically used this term Soylent, which is produced from soya and lentils, from two commercial cultures in plant breeding, and developed this new product, which of course has nothing no components produced of humans, of course. And so it's a very successful startup now. And there is constant deficits of this product, so that people, when order this, then they have to wait for several weeks before the shipments start. And this kind of food is maybe food of the future. When you don't eat salads, chicken, or beef, and so on, you just drink some kind of nutritionally perfect mix and don't need to eat anything else. So this shows that while we are struggling to win the battles of yesterday, the developed countries are going for just new radical innovations. And let's see next things concerning Russian agriculture now. We see that our rural population it's too much. Too much people live in rural areas. There is no need for such many workers in rural areas for modern high-tech agriculture, mechanized agriculture using chemization and other things. So only a small proportion, 22% of agricultural workforce is employed in agriculture. Others are employed in other sectors of economy, such as transportation, services, government, municipal workers, and so on. This means for us that there are basically two scenarios for development of rural areas. Either we go for ineffective agriculture with social stability in rural areas, which will mean that people in rural areas will have small salaries, but will have stable salaries, will definitely have their work in their rural villages. Or we go for high-tech agriculture, and many more people can go to cities and to adapt to new workforce with new educational standards, and to give new resources for innovation. But if we go for technological optimization, then the government will have to put into force some instruments, some measures to support the rural villagers, to help them to get new education and to go to cities. That's a big problem, and many countries several times already faced this problem of too much population in rural areas. And some countries were very effective in transition. For example, in the United States, there were very big problems with it, and even there were subsidies to farmers not to farm. So farmers, landowner, got money from government for just not doing anything. And then there was a number of reforms, and now in the United States, about 1 million people out of 320 million people is in agriculture. And while it's less than 1% of the workforce, and at the same time, this agriculture complex of the United States can provide food for all the world, if it was necessary, if it was paid for. So the problem, for example, of African countries is not that there is not enough food, because American farmers, for example, or Canadian can produce enough food. But the problem of African people who face hunger is that they don't have money to buy it. And in Russia, for example, not 1%, but more than 6% of workforce is in agriculture. So it's quite inefficient compared to developed countries. In addition to modernizing agriculture, we should consider great risks of great negative events with low probabilities, so-called wild cards. So we should make our agriculture complex more resilient to unintended and unanticipated future shocks. Some examples of such shocks are on this slide. You can see it. If ubiquitous proliferation of genetically modified organisms continues, then our, for example, grain exports are at risk, because when you sow genetically modified wheat, you have more than $10 per hectare of cuts in costs. It's a very significant amount. And while in developed countries, for example, grain yields are stable every year, we are very dependent on climate conditions and on seasonality. So because of this, it's because of our varieties. We use varieties of wheat and other grains and other cultures, which are not very resilient to climate change and to seasonality, while in developed countries there are new varieties, including genetically modified, which are resilient to seasonality and natural factors. Second thing is biosecurity and biosafety. There is a great problem of new emerging diseases which are proliferating in new areas, also due to climate change, because new areas become warmer, or maybe climate becomes milder, or climate becomes with more rains, with more moisture, and so parasites, viruses, and pests go from one area to another. They proliferate to new areas. This was the case of African pig disease. You know this story. And once it was just this pig fever was the disease of Africa. And then it got to Europe, and it got to Southern Europe. Then year after year, it went further to the north. And while in the Soviet Union it was detected only in Odessa and Georgia, it's now in Russia also in all the regions up to Moscow region. And there are real risks of new diseases killing tens or hundreds of thousands of livestock, because modern animal complexes have, for example, up to 50 or maybe 100,000 of, for example, pigs or chicken in one facility. And there are real risks of devastational effects on Russian livestock breeding sector. And if it happens, for example, prices of meat could skyrocket in retail, and meat consumption of people could decline from now 75 kilograms per person per year to maybe 40 kilograms. So these risks should be addressed by developing, including by developing new technologies to monitor these biological risks. And one of the things why we should do research into biotechnology, into genetic engineering, even if we don't decide to use this biotechnology in production, we need to know everything about it. We need to have our newest technology not worse than in developed countries, to have the ability to monitor what happens, to understand what happens, to develop techniques and methods and instruments to monitor the epidemiological situation, to monitor the proliferation of genetically modified organisms, and to identify them in time, for example, on customs, on the border. End of fishing. I already told you that global aquaculture could just devastate our fisheries industry. Bioreactor revolution. While we try to import substitute basic food processing machinery, we will face that new meat, eggs, and milk will be produced just from bioreactors, cheaper and more efficient. And the last, but not the least important, is that in situation when garage biotechnology, so-called garage biotechnology, meaning biotechnology research and development by citizens, by general public, becomes more available as biotechnology instruments become more available to many, including to radical groups and to terrorist states. There is real risks of covert biological warfare, including against Russia. So there is a great need of developing cutting-edge biotechnologies, including transgenic technologies, just to understand what happens and to create necessary barriers to defend ourselves, even if we don't go for biotech crops and biotech animals in our production. That's very important. I think I would end my speech on this slide and transfer word to my colleague.
All right, thank you, Ilya. So, are you happy with these answers? Do you want to live in the future? So now you know the future. Now you know what will be next. And the main question is, are you ready for this future or not? And including time restrictions, we'd like to show you a few slides how to feel comfortable in this future. So, well, this is a system for foresight in agriculture. And I strongly recommend you to do the same thing for you. So start from global foresight for what you are going to do here. Then understand what are the challenges and priorities. Then go for technological roadmaps and implementation. And don't forget about monitoring. So once again, we understand that agriculture could not be treated as a separate sector. It should be interdisciplinary integration. Second, we understand that there could be wild cards. Wild card is an event with very low probability but very high effect. And we show you a few wildcards for the future. If you want to be successful here, I strongly recommend you to use scientific, evidence-based approach. What it means? Sometimes you can hear that foresight is just when we gather together for 1 or 2 days or 3 days, and then we produce a future. This will not work. It could be a really first step for understanding our future. And as I've told you in the beginning of our presentation, we just give you the menu. We give you the menu and the path for this future, but not this future. It depends only on you. And I think that all of you could be a part of this agricultural future with your skills. And changing the skills is very important. So you start from identifying new technologies and markets which could be preferable for you. Then you go for your personal skills and matching the skills with this future. And at third step, you create your personal roadmap to your sustainable, green, and successful future in agriculture. So I'd like to say thank you on this, and we remain at your disposal. You could find a few materials on Foresight in our websites, in High School Economics and our Institute for Statistical and Economics of Knowledge. And I hope that at least half of your skills will be useful in the nearest 10 years, and you include the skills of foresighting in your top 10. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you, Ilya.